Hello, everyone, and welcome to another virtual event with Mysterious Galaxy. Tonight, we have a real thriller for you. We have author Marie Rutkoski with her book, Real Easy. I have to say, I am halfway through this book myself, and I really enjoy this. The characters are so well developed. The thrill behind it really has me going so far, so I'm very excited to soon finish this, Marie. In conversation, we have Carolyn O'Keefe. Thank you so much for both of you coming in. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, of course. As a reminder for everyone, I already see some of you have found the Ask a Question button below. If you have any questions to ask Marie about a writing process, about the book, whatever, go ahead and click that below and submit your question. If you haven't already, there's another link below that says buy books and get signed book plates. So every one of Marie's books that you order, you will get a signed book plate from her. Wonderful. Without taking too much time away now, I'm going to disappear. Hi, Tiffany. Hi, Leah. And let this wonderful author take it away. All right, I'll see you all towards the end.
Hi, Marie. Thanks so much for coming tonight, and thanks everybody for coming to see. I was hoping that I want to apologize for my dog who's being super annoying. He should fall asleep really soon. But Marie, can you tell us about the inspiration for your book? Where did you come up with the idea?
Yes, I certainly can. So this book, Real Easy, is set in 1999 in Illinois at a strip club where one dancer is murdered, another goes missing, and a third tries to get to the bottom of what happened. And I had the idea for this book. Well, first I should step back a little bit in time and just explain that about 20 years ago, I worked as a stripper in two different clubs. I just always thought that it would be a rich and interesting and complicated experience to write about in some way someday. And after enough time had passed, I began to wonder, well, what kind of story could I tell, fictional, of course, about my time there, drawing on the experience that I had. And there were two memories that stood out in my mind. And the first was of me being backstage and getting my makeup done and hearing one dancer tell another that a woman had been found dead by the side of the road, and that she had been identified by her silicone implants because implants have ID numbers, and so they can be traced to the individuals who purchased them. And when I heard that, I only heard a little bit of it. I did not know if it was true. It could have just been a kind of stripper ghost story. It could have happened in a faraway state or country. It wasn't necessarily near me, but I immediately thought, I cannot know if this is true, because if it is true, then maybe I shouldn't be working here. And at the time, I felt like I needed to continue working that job. And so I immediately shut it out of my mind. And then the second memory was of a night when one dancer was very high, and she was a very responsible coworker. And nobody thought that she just willfully decided to get blasted on the job. It just wasn't her style. And we all thought that somebody had put something in her drink, which is something that can happen at a club. A customer can, because the customer thinks it's funny or entertaining to see what happens when he drugs a dancer, or maybe he thinks that he can better able sweet talk the dancer into leaving the club and going home with him. Who knows? But it's not unexpected, or it's not completely unheard of that something like that would happen. And it was very clear that she needed a ride home. And I thought that I should step forward to offer her a ride. I thought that that would be the right thing to do. But it was 3 a.m. It was also in an area that I was working in an area I did not know well. I'm really terrible at directions. And this was in 2000. And I had the kind of cell phone that everybody had at the time, which was very basic, just like a little brick, where you could tap basic texts. And it certainly didn't have a GPS. And the dancer would be no help to me in helping her get home. And so, although I wanted to step forward and I thought it was the right thing to do, I was also too afraid to do so. In part, I think, because of that really disturbing story I had heard, sometime earlier at the club. So I didn't volunteer. This story has a happy ending. She got home safely. Everything was fine. Somebody else drove her. But as I was thinking, well, what kind of story could I tell that draws upon my experience? I did think, well, what if a dancer did volunteer to drive another one home? And what if it didn't go well? What if something really horrible happened? What if, this act of simple generosity met with true danger? And that's the origin of Real Easy.
That's really crazy. I wonder if you have friends or family members that maybe didn't know that you worked as a stripper until this book came out.
Well, I actually called my mom. I don't know if she's going to appreciate me airing this in public, but I called my mom maybe a couple of weeks ago, and I just said, look, Mom, there's something that I haven't told you. I feel that I should, because I'm going to speak openly about it when this book comes out. And I just told her. And she said, oh, well, I guessed that. And I said, how did you do that? What do you mean, how? Or what, were there like stray bills lying around? Like what because it wasn't when I was living at home that I was doing this. And she told me she read my diary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think that at some point when I moved, I just left diaries behind, and she just happened to flip through it, and just saw some things and that I had written and put a few thoughts together and came to her own conclusions. And I mean, I didn't mind. I know that some people could feel like that was a breach of trust, but I didn't care. And honestly, it was kind of fun and even sweet that she just has known for, 10 years, and just didn't feel like she needed to talk about it with me. Just something she filed away as a piece of information about her oldest daughter.
Were you writing fiction even then?
No. Or if I was, it was bad. It was not good. I think that probably what she saw would have been from the summer after college, because I worked the summer after college and then again during my first year of graduate school. So I wasn't writing fiction. I wasn't even much of a journal keeper. I don't write in a journal these days either, which is kind of sad, because I'd like to write more about, say, my children as they're growing up, something to save for them. But I just have so much else I need to write that I tend not to keep a diary.
It's hard. I want to ask you a little bit about the structure of the book. Well, first of all, I'll just let you kind of describe the different chapters, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, it's a book with a kind of kaleidoscopic structure, in the sense that it's told from many different points of view. And I do consider this book to have three main characters. One, Samantha, the dancer that drives the incapacitated one home and is kidnapped by a serial killer. So Samantha, and then there's Georgia, who's another dancer who is kind of roped into the investigation and initially is a reluctant participant in the investigation, but begins to become very dedicated to finding out exactly what happened. And then there's Holly Malin, who is the detective who is lead on the case. So there are three main characters, but there are also points of view from other characters, other dancers, the children of dancers, detectives, the killer himself. And it was, although this might sound unwieldy, I did try to exert a great deal of control when writing this book in two ways. And one was to make sure that the reader would not get confused and to very carefully flag whose point of view we are in at the beginning of each chapter, and to keep things contained within the chapter to that one person's point of view, but also to make certain that each chapter is important. And I'm not in somebody else's point of view for a gratuitous reason. I'm there in order to convey some information to the reader. There's some sort of clue or some sort of new perspective on information that they wouldn't have had before. So it's a little bit like the book has strung together beads on a string to form a necklace. And I think it was kind of cool for me as a writer to write a chapter where we might return to a moment we saw earlier, but because it's from a different character's point of view, we understand it differently. So really, even though there is a lead detective in the case, Holly, and even though Georgia is trying to figure out what happened too, the reader has the most knowledge of, far more than any character does.
And just from a practical point, like a nuts and bolts kind of perspective, how did you sort of keep everybody separated and all the timelines? Like I imagine like a Carrie Matheson type of board with the strings and the photos and everything connected. Do you keep things on index cards? Do you just like keep it all in your head? How do you like build it that way?
I don't have a cool hack for how to do this. I'm sorry, I wish I did. I tend to write carefully and slowly. So this is my debut novel for adults, but I've written several other books, all fantasy, for children and young adults. So this is, I am at, this point, experience in putting a story together. And so I have developed some ease with navigating a whole bunch of different characters too. Mm-hmm. And I had some great models as well. I mean, although this book is very distant in many ways from Game of Thrones, I would say that reading Game of Thrones was influential in the sense that Martin manages to manage an enormous cast of characters. I have nowhere near as many characters on the page as he does. And when I was reading Game of Thrones, it was so hard not to be invested. And I think that I suppose what I would say is that I tried to give every character weight and complications and my attention, so that even the secondary characters that we don't see very often, or we don't get their point of view, they're still interesting. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. And then speaking of like, it makes sense that you would draw a really realistic depiction of what a strip club is like because you have experience there. But I was really struck by how real the police officers felt too. How did you get them so good?
Thank you. Well, my brother is a police officer, and his wife, my sister, is a detective. And I just asked them a lot of questions. I also got to do a ride along with my brother and got to speak with a couple detectives. And police department and with an action, all the details about how it examined the scene of the accident, because at the beginning of the book, Samantha and the other dancer run off the road. And I spoke too with a detective who works in Manhattan, whose wife actually was a former stripper. I didn't know that when we agreed to meet up, and talk. It just kind of came out, and it's kind of a fun. Yeah, so I did a bit of research in terms of the police procedural aspect of the book.
What are you writing now? Are you working on more YA and children's things, or another adult novel?
Well, I'm working on another adult novel at the moment. I don't want to say too much about it because it's still very new. But I'm not done writing for children and young adults. I love the audience. I also love fantasy. It's some of my favorite stuff to read, and certainly one of my favorite genres to write in.
Do you think you'll write adult fantasy?
I don't know. Maybe that would be really fun. Yeah, I could see myself doing that perhaps one day.
Yeah, Marie, your video has disappeared. I don't know if it's an internet thing or if you might have accidentally turned off your camera.
I didn't, but I'm going to try to connect to a different internet.
Okay.
Just a second. Is that better?
I'm still just seeing like a purple robot.
I don't know why that is. I see my own video.
That's odd. Oh,
is there somebody who can help out? Because I can see myself.
Okay, you popped. Okay,
other people can see me.
So we can see you now. Okay. When I tried popping in to help you, then you pop back in.
I still can't see you, but if other people can, then that's fine.
So yeah, sometimes when that happens, I'm breaking the magic, everyone. It's usually an internet bandwidth issue. So if that happens, it's usually an internet thing. Sometimes it helps to just refresh the browser, and then it hopefully will fix it. Okay, I'm gonna disappear again.
Thank you. Marie, can you tell me what the title of the book means? Real easy.
Yeah. Well, there's Real Easy started as a personal title when I was working on the first draft. And it comes from a moment at the beginning of the book when one of the dancers who does everybody's makeup, this is Bella, she's telling the new girl, the one who is found high, that Samantha drives home. Bella is telling her that stripper ghost story that I mentioned earlier about the woman found dead by the side of the road. And Bella says that they ID'd her real easy on account of her breast implants. And I just called it Real Easy because why at the moment. But as I began writing the book, I realized that I was writing it in such a way as to render all the characters not so easy to know at first glance. And I do think that if I had an agenda when writing this book, it would have been to represent the dancers in this book as uncomplicated people, and to dismantle some of the cliches, some of the ways in which dancers are easily seen as just kind of props, naked props on a stage, and not as people who have lives and people they care for, histories, goals, dreams, etc. And so even though it is, according to Bella, real easy for the police to identify this woman, it's not so easy for the reader to identify the characters or to identify who the killer is. And so I wanted this kind of breezy, throwaway set of two words to become complicated as the story goes on in the reader's mind. And for them to think, oh, actually, nothing here is so easy. And to think of it as more of an ironic title. But I also, too, wanted to show that some things, finally, at the end of the book, are easy to understand, such as the love that Samantha has for boyfriend's child, Rose. Samantha stays in a relationship that readers will quickly and clearly identify as not great. And she does so because she can't have children of her own and she loves his daughter. And I think that that connection between the two of them, this idea that she sees Samantha as her real, Samantha sees Rosie as her real daughter, that is to understand that like a love between two people can be easy and simple.
I was struck by how cinematic the book is. As I was reading it, like I could really see it as being a Netflix series or on Hulu or something. And I was wondering if you, as you were writing it, if you were thinking about it, as a film, and if you thought about like which actors might play the different characters.
I have not gotten that far in thinking. I mean, I of course for this to be made into a limited TV show or a movie. I was really excited to see Mayor of Easttown last year. I think that if people are interested in Mayor of Easttown, they would probably be interested in this book, in part because the characters of, and also Holly, the detective, are kind of similar in that they are working women who have tragedies in their past and are working through those difficult moments. I haven't thought about who would play whom, but I would love it if readers have suggestions. I am all ears. So if you come up with some, tag me on social media. See what you'd come up with.
Yeah, I'd really love to see it made. Have you read anything great recently?
Yes, I read and loved a lot of people Melinda Lowe's Last Night at the Telephone Club, which won the National Book Award for Young Adult Fiction. It was so beautiful, and also so important. So important for representing Chinese American culture, but also for representing queerness. I'm someone who identifies as queer, and incorporating that into this book was also important to me. And so I just loved what Melinda has done, and I've followed her work for a long time, beginning with Ash, her first novel, which is a retelling of Cinderella, which was just gorgeous. And it's really been exciting to see her get the recognition she's deserved all along. I would also say, what have I read? I've read in manuscript a book that's coming out, another YA in the spring called Nothing Burns as Bright as You, by Ashley Woodfolk. It's a novel in verse. I'm reading Ninth House at the moment by Lee Bardugo, also amazing. I have a lot of books, or multiple books going at once, and I'm reading the third in the Thomas Cromwell trilogy by Chantal. It's called The Mirror and the Light.
That's a long one.
It's a whole book too. So kind of a sister book. It is a long one, but I just loved the first two. Let's see. There are just so many. I'm trying to think of more like fantasy, sci-fi. One book that's been on my TBR for a long time is Gideon the Ninth, which is a kind of sci-fi book that people love, and I'm excited. I haven't read Iron Widow, but I hear it's amazing. So that's a great suggestion. I will check that one out too.
Those are great.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I was wondering if your concept of the book changed over the course of you writing it, like since the first draft. Were there major changes?
Well, there was a consolidation of two characters into one. My editor, Serena, very rightfully suggested that we could squash two people and just one guy. And at first it was a hard idea to play around with in my head. And I said, sure, why not? And I'm so happy that I did. I don't even miss that other person floating around out there. I also was really surprised by the ending. Not in terms of who did it, because I knew going in who the killer was, but because of the last chapter that I wrote. And I don't want to spoil anything, but the last chapter came to me kind of over a period of 2 days. It doesn't sound like a rush, but it was so easy to write. And I was thinking about it constantly and editing it in my head. And I really wanted to end the book by giving a proper goodbye to each of my three main women, Samantha, Georgia, and Holly. And so, but I wasn't really expecting to do it, to really like craft a kind of ending for each of them. And so that I was happy with how that turned out.
And do you write in like chronological order of the story? Like it's not, because it's a novel about a serial killer, not everybody has a great time in the book. I wonder if you sometimes want to maybe like put off writing the scenes where bad things happen to characters you like.
No, but I don't want to write a downer of a book. I'm interested in the reader's pleasure. And so, I think that, yes, some disturbing things happen in this book, but also I think some funny things do too. I think you see a lot of backstage banter between the women. You see a kind of romance blossoming between sets of characters. And that's the romance is minor to the book, but it's still, I think, important. And you have moments of, I think, like friendship and connection. It's not all, I don't know. It's not, it's while some dark things happen, that's not, I think, the whole of the book.
For sure. And then I was just hoping you could tell us a little bit more about your what time of day you write, like how hard it is to balance it with teaching and your family, and kind of how you just get it all done.
Okay. Yes. I don't know how to get it all done. I do a lot because in addition to being a writer, I'm a professor of English. I teach Shakespeare at Brooklyn College, and fiction writing too, and children's literature. But Shakespeare is really what my training is in. And so I do have that part of my professional life, and I do have 2 sons, and so I have the usual duties of motherhood. So where do I find time to write? I think I think the trick is just to carve out time when you can. I am lucky in that I have vacations. So one aspect of being an educator that is a pretty sweet deal is that I have summers off and I have more holidays than I think people at other kinds of jobs have. And so I maximize that time. So really, I'm working when I'm on holiday. And my children are they're 13 and 9.5 now, so they're pretty. They can take care of themselves for a good stretch of time, whether it's playing video games or uh, wrestling each other on the ground. I mean, it's. I remember, I remember reading a profile of Nora Roberts in the New York Times, and she sounds incredible. I have no idea how she's able to do what she does, but I think that there was a detail about how when her kids were younger, she would just go into her room and shut the door and write for hours on end. And the rule was that they could not interrupt her unless there was blood or a broken bone.
I've definitely read that. Yes.
I'm not like that, especially because they would never allow that. Like, they want me to know if one of them pulls the other's hair. Like, there's no way that would fly in my house. But like, the boys are now at the stage where they can entertain themselves for at least an hour, and I can write in an hour, not a lot, but little bits add up over time.
That's great. I think I'm going to turn to questions from the audience. So if anybody wants to ask more questions, you see on the bottom it says ask a question. You can just put it right in there, and I'm going to click onto it now. And okay, so the first question is, have there been any significant changes in your approach of world building between young adult and adults?
That is such a great question. And I think the person who's asking that already knows that even when you're not writing fantasy or sci-fi, there's still a lot of world building that happens. I feel like that's kind of implicit in the question that's being asked, that there's still like world building that's happening even when you're writing about this world. I would say that being a lover of writing and reading fantasy has really helped me in writing really easy. Because I think that what appeals to me as a reader of fantasy is the thick texture of the world that is built. I remember reading a description of Downton Abbey where the person described like all the details as the equivalent of 400 count Egyptian cotton sheets, that it was just like that densely woven, that that many threads, just in terms of like how visually everything is so put together, like the starch colors on the maids' dresses and so forth. And I like to have that kind of thick texture when writing fantasy, and for it to be given to me when I'm reading it. I think that that's a skill that fantasy writers do very well, and I think that it can be applied to writing anything. And I certainly tried to do that when I was describing the world of the club, and all the different aspects to it, because it's not just that dancers work there, but also a house mom, waitresses, the DJ, the owner and manager. There are a lot of different roles within the world of the club, and it has particular smells and appearances, and there's certain kinds of food that's served there. It has its own kind of special hours and rules of etiquette. And in a way, I mean, a strip club is like a fantasy world. It's a fantasy world that's created within our own world for people. So I definitely borrowed some of the skills that I hope I've developed as a writer of fantasy when writing this book.
That's so interesting. The next question is, each character has such a clear role in this story. Did the direction of these characters or their role in the story change as you were writing them?
Georgia became more involved than she was in the initial draft. I think I didn't quite know what I wanted Georgia to be or what I wanted her to do. And so when in later drafts, she became more involved in the investigation earlier on. And I don't want to spoil anything about what happens with her, what she discovers. But yes, I suppose initially I was not thinking of her as, I thought of her as an important character, but I didn't do with her quite yet in the first draft.
And the next question is, what character's perspective did you enjoy writing from this book or any of your previous ones?
Well, in terms of my previous ones, probably the ones that I'm best known for are the Winter's Curse books. And I would say that writing from Aaron's point of view was really fun for me because he's so angry. And he has such a dark background. And so exploring that anger and the wound of his past was, I think, really interesting to me as the series went on, especially because although we get his perspective a little bit in The Winter's Curse, we don't get very much of it. And then we get more in the second book. And then by the third book, the book is pretty evenly split between his point of view and Kestrel's point of view. In terms of this book, I loved writing from the point of view of the children. There are a couple. Rosie gets a chapter from her point of view, and Melody, who's the daughter of one of the dancers, gets her point of view as well. And I really loved writing from their perspectives.
And the next one is, were there any scenes or important elements you wrote for this book that didn't make it into the final printed version, but you wished it?
No. I don't even remember things once I cut them. They're in the past. I never returned to them in my mind. I don't even remember them.
That's probably good. You don't want to regret it.
Right.
And what was your approach to the book structure? Did you have an outline of things that you wanted to have happen, or did anything catch you by surprise? This is one of those plotter or pantsers questions.
Okay, well, I will say one thing. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the wonderful Carrie Ryan, who wrote The Forest of Hands and Teeth, which is kind of a dystopian book that's set in the future after the zombie apocalypse. So the world is overrun by zombies. And Carrie is a wonderful friend and writer. And I was on a writing retreat with her, and there is a crucial scene. It's kind of a dangerous scene where maybe the killer is going to be discovered. And I said to Carrie, well, it is 1999. This character has a cell phone, but I don't actually want her to have it, because then she could just call for help. And, and if she called for help, then I'm going to have a problem, like plot-wise. And Carrie said, no, you can't do that. That cell phone is her lifeline. You have to have her. She has to have the cell phone. She would never leave it behind. There's no realm of possibility that she would do something so risky and not take her cell phone with her. And I said, well, what if the battery dies? She's like, no, you have to like, basically she was like, you have to, it was a little bit like, Marie, put on your big girl pants, give her the cell phone and figure it out. Like, I know that it doesn't really work for you right now, plot wise, but it defies logic. And so just give it to her and make it so that it works. Or like in the book that she has this like lifeline to the world. And so I was surprised by that. And I was surprised that I could make it work. And she was right. I wasn't surprised she was right because she's right about everything. But I was surprised that I could do it because it seemed sort of impossible when she told me that I had to.
That's great. And are there any other genres you're interested in writing in other than thriller and sci-fi?
Well, I'd love to write a historical. Though Real Easy is a historical, which is kind of odd for me to think. The 1990s.
That makes me feel so old.
I mean, me too. But 1999 was a very different time from now. Technology-wise, in terms of things we didn't have then. I grew up without the internet. I'm so glad that I did, honestly. I'm glad that I just had years and years of reading books and going to the library, and instead of searching for stuff online or worried about my Facebook profile or my Instagram profile or Twitter, I'm grateful for that. But I would be interested in writing an historical book. I realized when I was writing Real Easy that I just cannot get away from romance. I feel like every book I write has to have some kind of romance in it. I guess I'm just an optimist and I love love. So I think that because it is kind of, it's funny to me, only funny in how it shows my own devotion, that in this kind of dark book, I still managed to have like some like light romantic narratives. Not even just one, but 3. So I think that it might be fun just to write like a straight up romance.
I'd love to read that. That sounds great. And do you have advice for aspiring writers? Like, what's the piece of advice you tell your fiction students that you think is really great advice for them?
I mean, the best advice that can be given to anybody on this is to read as much as possible, and to be very Catholic in your approach. And I don't mean Catholic in terms of the religion. I mean Catholic just in terms of consuming everything from everywhere. Like there are lots of different kinds of things that you can read. Whether it's letters or journals or screenplays, it doesn't just have to be books. I read this poem by Mary Oliver that I just found on the internet today, and then I was crying on the subway because Mary Oliver always makes me cry, and just made my life better because I found that poem. And so that I think is probably the best advice. But something that I've been thinking a lot about lately is how studying Shakespeare helped shape my ability to write dialogue, because I became so used to reading only dialogue. If you're reading a Shakespeare play, there's not much in the way of stage direction. There's very little, and there's nothing in the way of description except what's in the dialogue itself. The dialogue does describe a lot, but you really just have people saying things to each other. And I think that has helped me write dialogue quite naturally. It comes easily to me, and I think it's because I spent so much time reading plays. So I might suggest that.
That's so interesting. Can you talk about how you chose the names of your characters?
Yes. Well, it's interesting when it comes to the dancers, because the dancers actually have two names. They have their real names and then they have their stage names. And so when I was thinking of, because, most dancers aren't using their real names on stage. I think anybody who has any kind of passing familiarity with the strip club can guess that the dancers have chosen names for themselves. And so then what I tried to do when naming them was to think first for the real name, well, what would their parents have chosen? What would their parents have chosen for them, given the time that these women were born, generationally and within the time period? What were popular names? Like Samantha was a pretty popular for a girl who's born in the late 70s, early 80s, mostly like late 70s. Rachel as well. And then for the names, I tried to think of, well, what would these women want to convey about themselves? Either what they would want to convey about themselves emotionally, or maybe like how they want people to see them. Samantha chooses the name Ruby just because it's her favorite color. There's a character named Paris, and I think that just by her name, you can guess that she probably has some romantic ideas about Europe, or thinks that like Paris is the city of love. And like some of the names are just kind of straight up sexy names, like Lacey, Desiree. So I did put a lot of thought into those, to all the characters' names, but especially the dancers. And there's even one moment where one of the characters, who's a dancer, Catherine, is thinking about her stage name, which is Violet. And she thinks about how she doesn't actually care to know what the women's real names are. Even though in the world of the club, at least as I experienced it, if you knew a dancer's real name, that meant that you had some kind of connection with her, that you saw each other outside the club. Maybe you had met her family, or you'd gone to her house. I knew some dancers' real names and not others. And so, in the book, it's known that it's kind of a big deal to share what your real name is. And Catherine thinks that she doesn't actually care. She doesn't want to know what the real names are, because she cares more about the names that are chosen. And she thinks that what her name says about her is that she didn't pay enough attention when she was growing up to the violets that were growing wild in her grandmother's backyard.
And then I've had so many people comment on how beautiful the jacket is, and I just was hoping you could talk a little bit about how this image was chosen and kind of what it was like going through the process with the art department.
I love this jacket. I love it. I love how vibrant it is, but also dark at the same time. It's kind of dark and glowing. I also love how deep, like, it looks like you could just kind of sink your fingers into that grass. And it does kind of have a murder mystery connection, and certainly a connection to this book because of the scene where a body is found in the grass, as is a pearl earring. And I just really love this spine. I was hoping that, even like whether the book is shelved face out or spine out, that it would be beautiful either way and would kind of catch the eye. And this pearl earring ends up becoming really important in the book. I don't think that's too spoilery to say. So I'm so grateful. I just am really happy with this.
Was that the first sort of draft they showed you, or did it go through several iterations?
So the art department was really patient with me and really dedicated. And we went through a lot of different ideas. Some with like a car driving at night, which definitely signaled mystery, right? Like it definitely, like you see a car driving at night and you know, okay, I'm in the realm of a mystery novel. And so it was effective that way. But then maybe it looked a little too easy. It would have been too easy to blend it with other books that had cars on, driving at night. So, there were some ideas that were kind of tossed around, and I just, the day when they sent the first visual draft of what the cover was to me and my agent, we just knew immediately that that was the cover.
I love it so much. It's really great. Well, I think that's pretty much all the questions that we have. Does anybody else want to ask anything either at the bottom or in the chat? What brings you joy? That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, that question should be asked of everybody on a regular basis, I think.
It should.
Let me see. I'll bring you something that brings me joy. Just a moment.
I mean, especially with a book like this that is so heart-wrenching. I think that's a good idea. What brings joy?
This brings me joy. These are paper flowers that my son made for me at school.
Oh,
yeah. Those are gorgeous.
Thank you.
Those are really gorgeous. Good job. I think this is a perfect time to go ahead and bring this event to a close. Marie, where can people reach you on social media and follow you more?
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
I'm on Twitter. Oh, not on TikTok. I'm not on TikTok. I can't do the TikTok. I'm too old for the TikTok. I love seeing it when it comes to me. All the best funny ones. I'm really grateful for that. I'm not on TikTok, but I am on Twitter and on Instagram. I'm technically on Facebook, but I don't like to be there. I know that Instagram is technically part of Facebook. I'm mostly on Instagram. That was a long answer. It was too long of an answer, and I apologize.
Totally fine. Well, thank you everyone for coming and enjoying this event with us. If you haven't already, go ahead, hit that button below. That'll take you to our event page. Real easy, and any one of Marie's other books are available for order. And with order, you get a signed book plate from her. With that, I'm going to say good night, everyone. Marie, again, thank you so much for coming. Carolyn, thank you so much for moderating.
Thank you. This was so much fun. Thanks, Marie.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone for coming and asking such great questions. I really appreciate it.
They were really good. If you maybe missed the event or halfway through, or you want to rewatch, you can always rewatch later on the same Crowdcast link, or we should have this event uploaded on our YouTube channel in about a day or two. All right, with that, I'll see you at the next event. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.
Good night.